I must have been at least 6 or 7 when I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time, and murders were common and frequent. I remember during the particular vicious era where the bombings rarely stopped. I would stay at home, sitting on the front of my television, watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes that contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe that it was thinly veiled an attempt to be part of the media to scare tactics to keep kids in place. Because the moral of every episode revolved around uptight, idolatrous stuff, like bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was really weird, and in Arabic to top it all off. I didn't understand of it much. The most part of the images were just very graphic and very comparative. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It would remain as much and the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in and out on the old, rusted, closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams could be heard more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for the children's programming. Then a text would appear on screen in Arabic reading, "That's where the bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalist and a photographer, and that show had been in my mind my whole life, popping in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I had enough and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where very much that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research and eventually traveling on site, I found out that it was now dislocated and abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera, and it was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of curiosity, making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room. Having to break through at least a few old locks and managing to break in the heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood and even tiny bone fragments scattered all across the floor along with feces. It was a small room, an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me the most was what made me turn away and never wanted to look back, was a bolted cage microphone hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. And that, my little pretties, was, well, Where Bad Kids Go, a creepypasta. My final thoughts on the story? Alright, I have to say that this story was actually something that I really didn't know what to say because of how good this pasta is. Like, I'm not gonna say this pasta was bad. It wasn't bad at all. It was actually a pretty good creepypasta. I have seen and heard of, certain narrations of this story, so I definitely have to say this one was like another popular creepypasta at the time. Now, this pasta was definitely something, and I have to say, when I first saw this story, it honestly was pretty something. Like, I didn't expect, to see this in there, but I definitely have to say that this pasta actually had a pretty good concept going for it. Now, I do like the concept, of having this, this TV show that somebody watched this very strange show, and this was actually pretty freaky. Like, I was kind of hesitant to read this story because of how freaky it is. Like, I think I might have read this back, I think in 2015 or maybe 2014 or something. I'm not really sure when this was made. I have a feeling this was made in 2013 or 2014 perhaps. Maybe longer than that. I really don't know. But I definitely have to say this story was actually a pretty good concept. I get the bad children were either, starved or killed or tortured or something, but what was so scary about the microphone there? Could it be that it might be, well, maybe recording the screaming of children or something? I actually have a few theories as that could be it, or it could be some paranormal stuff. I'm not really too sure. Despite this being like a short creepypasta, it's still a pretty good story. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this story was actually pretty good for what this one is. Now, I definitely have to say that maybe one of the bad kids might have set the place on fire on the inside, which that's definitely very possible, which I'm not really too sure, but this is actually quite possible, to be honest. Like, whenever I, read this story back when I was younger, I definitely have to say that this story actually had some pretty good concept going for it. Like, for example, this story actually provided a pretty good detail and good concept as to what this is or why this was the case or something. I really have to say that this story actually had a pretty good storyline with it. I really liked the storyline of how this went out. It was amazing. It really had a good concept going for it. It's a pretty good story. I definitely have to say that I really do like the fact that, the story actually have a lot of believability into it. That's definitely something I'm definitely saying. It's definitely a pretty good pasta for what this one is. It actually had a really good it's a really good concept. Like, I really do like the concept of this story. It's a pretty good one, to be honest. So I definitely have to say right now that this story will basically a pretty good concept for what this story is. It's a pretty messed up one at that. I definitely would have to say that this story actually, provided pretty good, detail. Although it's a short story, I do wish there was like a little bit more concept into it. I wish there was like a little bit more added into it. Cuz then if there was more, added into this story, like if the story was longer, then there is a good chance that the story actually might have been, have a pretty good more concept to it. I really do find this story to be a pretty good one, to be honest. It's a pretty interesting one to, I'm definitely gonna say this story was definitely something. I'm not saying that it's a terrible story. It's not. I definitely would recommend that. I could say, that there could be like maybe a little bit more as to who or actually what happened that caused, the building inside to go on fire. Like, I know, Lebanon is a country in the Middle East, which, by the way, there's like a lot of war going on in the Middle East. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much into detail on that, but yeah, I definitely have to say there's a lot of war going on there. So I definitely have to say this story was actually a pretty interesting one. The fact that it's taking place in Lebanon, not like, in the US or anything, because most creepypastas, they do tend to go, take place in the United States and that. So I definitely have to say that this story actually provided pretty good detail on what actually is going on and the person becoming a journalist trying to find out more information, which I definitely have to say it's actually pretty interesting, somebody becoming a journalist and wanting to know more about, well, what happened and what was actually the case and what was going on. It's still a pretty good story and a pretty good concept for what it was going for. I definitely have to say this story was definitely something. It would definitely had a pretty good, concept of being, pretty tense. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this story was pretty tense when I first saw this one. Like, when I saw this story for the first time, it had really me tense on, the what this story was going for. It's not your typical, cliched fest of a story. No, it doesn't have anything of that. So I definitely have to say that was actually pretty good about this story because most creepypastas, I'm not gonna lie when I say this, they do tend to sit there and do that. I don't know why, but for some reason they do. So, I guess the next thing I'm gonna be completely honest about is that I'm not sure who the original author is because it does not say who the original author of the story is, so I'm gonna have it as anonymous unless of specifically said otherwise, which means if I do find out who the original author is, I'll be sure to give this author proper credit for the story. I'll be sure to give him or her proper credit. This was an awesome story, and I wonder if this author has also wrote any other good creepypastas. So, I guess with that being the case, that being said, this is just kind of, me sitting there and saying, I do wish there was a little bit more, added into it. Although it's a short pasta, but it's still a good one. That I'm definitely saying. It's a good pasta, although I do wish there was a little bit more added into it. So I guess that's just what I'm trying to say. But, with that being the case, that being said, let me wrap up this review because there's not really much for me to talk about. Now, with that being the case, that being said, this is just simply my own personal opinion. Like I'm always going to say, this is only my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because it had a pretty good concept going for it. It's a really interesting, story. I really do appreciate, the time and effort into it. However, I do wish there was a little explanation as to what actually happened in the building where that show was filmed. And I would also like to wonder, and this is something I'm also wondering too, is, and this is something I'm gonna point out, and I'm just gonna say this now, is I'm gonna be asking about, this is that I kind of wish that this one had a little bit more explanation as to why, why this happened or what caused the building to go on fire. Explanations are better than no explanation at all. So that's just me though. But I also would like to, hope that there is a better concept. Like I'm just really hoping that there is like maybe another explanation as to, why why this was on fire, why did, this happen, or something like that. Like, I would really like to hear, more on what's going on there, but other than that, the story was actually pretty well made in detail. So, anyways, I guess with that being the case, that being said, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so then you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.